Hello and welcome to Behind the Bearcat. This is the podcast where the Northwest Missouri State University Career Services Office chats with Northwest faculty, staff, students, alumni, and friends to hear about their career journeys, how they got to where they are, and how they became Bearcats. I'm Career Services Internship Coordinator Travis Klein.
And I'm Hannah Christian, the Assistant Director of Career Services.
And today we are joined by Andrew Wegley, who is the Managing Editor for the Northwest Missourian. Hi, Andrew.
Welcome. Hey, what's up? How are you guys?
Good.
I just want to say you guys both have like great voices for podcasts. I'll be honest, I never listened to this one before, so
that's okay. I haven't listened to it either.
That intro is just, you sound like Michael Barbaro from the New York Times.
Oh, thank you. I have 11 years of radio experience and a degree in broadcasting from Northwest.
There you go.
It's the only way I use it in my current job, so thank you. So, Andrew, you are a student here at Northwest. So what year are you and what major are you?
I'm a junior, and I think my major is called Mass Communications, emphasis sports media, or like sports media, but I usually just say...
You'll just figure it out when you get that diploma.
Yeah, whenever they hand it to me, I guess I'll figure out what it says and then update my resume accordingly. But, just sports media in general. Mostly just refer to it as journalism when people ask me outside of the realm of the university, because I don't know if other people really know. So I just say journalism.
And how long have you been writing for the Missourian?
Since the first semester of my freshman year is when I started, so the fall of 2017 when I got on campus, I went to like those faculty meetings that they do where you meet everybody that is in kind of your major, and they said if you want to work for the Missourian, you should talk to Stephen Chappell, and so I tracked him down at their meeting and enrolled in practicum and have been writing there regularly since. So,
well, let's back it up. What was your first job, Andrew?
First job.
First paid job.
At the paper or just in general?
Like ever in your whole life?
Hy-Vee, actually.
All right.
Hy-Vee in Raytown, Missouri. It's a suburb of Kansas City. I'm from the Kansas City area, so.
What'd you do at Hy-Vee?
I started as a checker, and then I worked my way up to customer service clerk.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Ambitious.
The big time, for sure. I always said I was on the road to the white shirt because our managers all wore white shirts, but then they changed that rule. So then we said we were on the road to the black tag because they have black name tags.
For a while, they had blue shirts.
Mm-hmm, that's when I started.
Yeah, I gotcha. I have a blue shirt in my closet that I sometimes wear here. And for the longest time, I was kind of paranoid to wear it because they would make fun of me like I was a Hy-Vee manager or something.
Yeah. Yeah, they had like the real nice blue ones, and they changed them to like these shirts that felt like sandpaper. And they had those until I left. And then after I left, they got like these really nice like golf polos. So, yeah, I kind of missed out. Oh, well.
What kind of skills did you gain as a checker? Talk to me about like checking.
I guess at first, it's not that I didn't like talking to strangers, but it was just like having to force a conversation with every single person that comes to your line and just talking to people. People in high school, I'm 16 years old when I got hired there. So no 16-year-old, I think, is great at talking to adults at any just level of regularity. So that was part of it, was just, hey, how are you? Getting used to that. And then I think, once you do it for a month, you kind of fall into that pattern. But then sometimes people throw you off when they actually tell you how they're doing and not just, oh, pretty good, here's my fuel saver, this and that. So I think just a lot of what I learned on that was just talking to people. And then another part is just like, you kind of have to expect to work the whole time. Because I felt like right when I started that we were never busy that often. Like, I don't know why. I was just like, oh, I'm never really working that hard. And then, like, as I got going, like, I don't know, like a couple months later, it was like Christmas season. It was just like, man, I got to line my whole shift. Like, this is a crock. Like, I'm sick of it. But so I guess part of that was just kind of work ethic thing. Like, yeah, you have to expect to work when you're at a job.
To show up and do something the whole time you're there.
And then be annoyed, like, when somebody else is like, you get in, like, oh, yeah, we had 3 call-ins tonight. And it's just like, I don't know. Yeah, I guess if you expect too much out of other people, I think is when you get burned. So I guess I learned that as a checker. Great time.
How to look people in the eye and then touch all their groceries.
Yeah, touch all their groceries
kind of funny.
And ask for their phone number at the end for their fuel saver.
And that sounds like, talking to people, that sounds like really good preparation to be a journalist, because that's 9/10 of the job, right? Is interviewing people and having those conversations that are sometimes awkward. So.
Yeah, and then customer service even helped me more with that. I guess I don't know if I've ever really even considered it until right now, but when you go to customer service, it's not just, with checking, they're all there to check out. Like, they come up to you, they know what, unless they're going to like, hey, can you help me find something? Like, more often than not, they are there because they would like to pay for the the goods that they're about to buy. But a customer service is always different. It was like, are you going to buy a lottery ticket, or are you going to do a Western Union transaction? So it's how can I help you instead of how are you doing? So just, and sometimes you get yelled at, you just learn how to deal with stuff. And there are a lot of parallels there with journalism that I don't think I'd ever considered until I came here on this podcast today. So
behind the Bearcat, making the connections.
Turns out maybe Hy-Vee did a lot more for me than I ever anticipated for my journalism career.
So did you work there all through high school?
Yeah, I worked there all through high school, then got to college and thought, I don't need a job. And then I'm like, a semester later, I was like, I'm out of money. So, so I actually went to the Maryville Hy-Vee shooting a commercial for FIMP upstairs, the Fundamentals of Electronic Media Production. We were making fake commercials, and I had my Hy-Vee jacket on, and I had a white shirt and like a red tie. I looked like a manager, but we were just shooting a commercial, which we didn't even have permission to do. But the hiring manager saw me, and she's like, hey, if you want a job, let me know. And that was in like the fall. And then in January, I called her, and I was like, hey,
I'm ready for my
I
job
was
now.
like, I'm ready for my job. And she was like very skeptical. She was like, okay, call me back on Monday. But she asked me what my store number was in Raytown. And then she called me back 10 minutes later. She said, hey, I just called Raytown. I'd like to interview you right now. So I guess Raytown had good things to say about me. So I got hired here. I worked there for about 2 months and then was fired, actually. So I allegedly stole $2, which there's a whole story behind that if you have the time, I can tell it. But I feel like I've told it so many times. But essentially, they said I stole $2, and I did accidentally walk out of the store $2, but they didn't believe my story, and they fired me. So, and I was kind of annoyed, and also because it was just I'd worked there for 2 years and 7 months, and I was like, if this would have happened in Raytown, they would have understood, but I'm new up here, and
so you had no cred, you got
yeah,
no trust,
no credibility. I know that the store when I was working there, they said they were losing hemorrhaging money because their cash accountability was just an oxymoron. So I think it was just a product of bad circumstance, but
I think this is a good, I don't think we've had anyone ever talk about being fired on the show, but I think that's a good point. That happens to people all the time. Sometimes I have to deal with students who've been let go from a job, either off campus or on campus. Any words of wisdom for someone who's been fired? How to deal with that? How to get back up after you got let go? Yeah,
I was, I don't know if I could say this, but I was really pissed off. The day I got fired, I actually, and maybe part of it was that I didn't know I was signing my termination slip. Because she framed it the hiring manager framed it like it was almost like an incident report, and they're going to look into it and decide how to advance. And I was like, okay, whatever. I'm essentially signing this write-up. And then after I signed it, which you should read everything you sign. That's one point. That you should
read everything. That's a key. You should read everything.
Read everything before you sign it, for sure. And then she was like, all right, well, so this won't affect your ability to get a job anywhere else. I was like, but I guess you're done here and also at the other store. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. That was my exact words. I said, oh, okay, cool. And I was like, well, not cool, but okay. And then I was going to leave. And then she said, make sure you shut the door. Or no, she said, make sure you clock out on your way out, because you have to clock in for them to fire you. Didn't know that until I had to clock in to get fired. So, and I slammed the door, which maybe wasn't my most professional look, but I think given the circumstances, I'll give myself a pass on that. And then immediately called the Raytown store, and I was talking to my managers there that knew me for 2.5 years, and I was like, this is a situation. I feel like I'm getting kind of screwed over, and was trying to see if I could get my job back there. And ultimately, that didn't work out either. I don't know where I was going with that, if I had a good point to make. But I did write it. I gave the money back after I got fired, because I still had the $2 in my wallet, because every time I'd opened it, oh, this is Hy-Vee's, this is not mine, or this is that customer's. But I gave it back, but I wrote a very sarcastic note that said to, and it had the hiring manager's name. And it was from the bakery, because the whole situation involved the bakery. And I wrote the date from which, because the instance, so they questioned me about it on March 3rd, and the instance had happened February 10th. So I still had the money almost a month later. And I wrote February 10th, and I said, can you guys make sure that the hiring manager gets this? And then just left. And I was like, I'm never going to shop there again, but Hy-Vee's a good place to shop, so I still do.
Well, you learn more from your failures than you do your successes. So that was a learning opportunity for you, and through some professional skills. So
also to be gracious.
Be gracious.
Be gracious. Be gracious, loser. Be gracious when they fire you, because you just never know. Maybe someday you'll own Hy-Vee and you'll be
it's employee owned, so I guess I'm out on that one.
So how did you come to Northwest? What made you come to Northwest? You're from Kansas City area.
Right, yeah. Golly. Okay, so I think everybody's dream is to go, maybe not to North, not everybody's dream, but like especially in the Kansas City area, it's like, oh, KU, Mizzou, K-State's right there, UMKC's right there, Arkansas is not too far away, all those huge schools, and you're kind of in the crossroads of all of it. And Northwest, I think, was an afterthought. And for me, like the dream school was Syracuse because I wanted to be a journalist. Like Nick Wright went to Syracuse, Andy McCullough went to Syracuse, like a ton of professional journalists went there. But Syracuse is like $40,000 a year. So I was like, okay, I'll weigh my options. And I applied to a lot of schools, mostly because in high school they gave us a full-size candy bar every time we got an acceptance letter. And they would they had all of our pictures on this bulletin board and they would staple up like the logos of the schools you got accepted to. And I was just like, okay, I'm trying to bank as many candy bars as I can before I get out of here. So I was applying to a lot and I had an offer from Simpson College, which is like a tiny college up in Iowa. And they had a really nice scholarship offer. It would have been about the same cost to go there, but given that their tuition is twice as much as it is here, and it would have been out of state in Iowa. But I ultimately decided on Northwest, mostly for the familiarity, and then I just liked I came here on one visit. It was like a school visit. It wasn't even a personal one. I liked the campus. I just liked the feeling of it. And I ultimately just felt like I'd be more comfortable here. I actually ironically didn't know anything about the journalism department. I never met Stephen Chappell. I never took any tour of this newsroom that we're shooting the podcast next to. I never did any of that.
Would that have influenced your decision as a high school student?
I think I would have definitely came. I mean, I was committed to coming here regardless, but I mean, I didn't look into anything, which was in hindsight was terrible choice. Like if I'd ended up at Missouri Western with the Griffin News down there, I don't know what I'd be doing right now. But thank God I came here and yeah, it's just worked out for me. And partly, I guess if I'm being fully honest, there was a girl in my high school that was going here that I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to.
Full disclosure.
Yeah, I was like, okay, we're going to go to school together and get married. But then you got here and a week later, you break up. So it's like, oh, okay. So you got
But they have a good journalism department.
Right, but you got to chart your own path. You got to start working at the Missourian and everything really worked out so far, knock on wood, but.
I'm always interested in young people that choose journalism because that seems like, newspapers are not what they used to be.
Yeah.
Being, kindly speaking. So,
right. No, I've heard it all.
Yeah. And it's always interesting to me that students are still drawn to that field. So what was it? Did you do journalism in high school? Like, did you have a high school paper that you worked on or a yearbook or what drew you to journalism? Because that seems like a hard skill for students that don't like to read and don't enjoy writing.
Yeah, I was always good at writing like English papers for my composition class. I actually had the same teacher for English the last 3 years of my high school. Just like she kept moving up as we moved up, so we got lucky. And she said once at the end of one of my papers, like, if you ever considered a career in sports journalism, it's not necessarily glamorous or high paying, but I think you'd be good at it. And I'd always read, and a big part of it was that when the Royals were really good in 2014, 2015, I was like constantly following them and still did in 2013 and 2016 when they were not as good. But just on the record that I'm not
a fair
weather, though I didn't watch it much last year. It's tough when they lose 105 or whatever it was. But so I was always following along the Kansas City Star. Andy McCullough, the guy I mentioned earlier, was writing there at the time. And so I was reading every single day. And I guess it took, I don't know why it took for that comment to make me realize, like, oh, this is exactly what I want to do. I want to watch sports and get paid to write about it, which is a grossly simplification of what sports journalism is. But
if you think about it, though, like that's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I was like 17 years old. I was like, all these people really have to do is watch the game and then write about it. They don't have to do anything else, which definitely didn't know all that went into it back then. But that was a big part of it. I did yearbook my senior year and just kind of realized that I had a better grasp of how to write or just how to tell a story than most people there. And I got here and assumed that would not be the case, and it definitely wasn't at first. Like, I mean, you're a freshman in a newsroom full of people that have been doing it, and so I guess what drew it to me was the idea of people are always going to like sports. People are always going to want to consume sports media in some way, and like a good story. If I say the word good story, you could probably think of a newspaper article you read 2 years ago that you're like, oh yeah, that was a good story that I read. So just to have that kind of effect on people and be able to put into words something that makes you feel something, that was always, I don't know, I just always want to tell a good story. So whether it's verbally and then to do it through writing. So that was a very long, meandering, roundabout answer.
You say good story, and the story I think of is the one that you just had in the Missourian, where you featured Matt Tritton, who is on the Bearcat Radio Network. You followed him to work and told a day in the life story.
I really appreciate that.
That was one of the best stories I've ever written on something that's not something that everyone would say is newsworthy. So I think being able to tell a story, even the small stories, is such a strong skill, and you have it.
I really appreciate it. I definitely try and work on it as often as I can.
So tell us what goes on behind it. So if that's a simplified version, talk to us about what it actually takes to tell a story about the sports event that you just watched.
Right. So I guess the example in my head, because I covered the Northwest men's basketball team, is just a basketball game. And I guess as a 17-year-old, I thought you would just go and you would write. And I don't even know if I even considered then that you'd have to talk to people afterwards. But I mean, basketball, it's partly, I didn't even consider like, oh, I'm going to have to take my own photos. I'm going to have to live tweet games. I'm going to have to do all that. So that's all part of it. I mean, it's like sitting on the baseline. You're taking photos for most of the game, trying to edit as you go, obviously watching the game, taking it in, getting a sense of the crowd, getting a sense of, watching the score, all that, who's hot, who isn't, who's missed a lot of shots, who's made a lot of shots, who is, who's hurt, who's not playing. Why aren't they playing? Do we know about this? And it's just compiling, okay, so I have to ask about all this after the game. And then to me, the biggest part of storytelling is finding the moment in the game that changed the game, that defined the game, that maybe embodied the game. And that's a lot of times what I do if you read any of my sports recap stories, because it's like, nobody cares, or maybe they do, but not as many people are going to care about a basketball game if the first thing you write is, Northwest played a basketball game today and they won, 30 to 12 or something like that, which would never be a basketball score, but
it could be.
But if you right, yeah. But if you tell the story of a play that changed the game, or of a player that changed the game, and Trevor Hudgens is a good example because he's been doing that a lot lately, and he's been my lead a lot lately. It's just finding that moment, because I think when you're reading it when you're 18 years old, you don't realize how much thought goes into that lead, and you have to watch. I mean, you have to take seconds of action that you watched once and then maybe took notes about, and you've got statistics to help you, and they have shot charts you can go back and see exactly what happened when, which is very convenient, because when you're covering high school sports, in a lot of ways that's harder. But yeah, you just have to try and remember everything you can, take notes, write about it, ask for reactions of it, put it into writing in a way that you're going to make the reader feel something close to what you felt when you saw it. And that's the most important part of storytelling. And then keeping that consistent element throughout. Because if you have a good lead in the story, that'll help a lot. But how's the middle part? And that's one thing I really try to do. And I think that if you ask me what the most important part of storytelling is, it is that every single word you write in a really good story should be intentional. And I don't think a lot of people do that very often, and that's what I try to do.
You mentioned Twitter as well, and you are a fantastic Twitter follow.
I appreciate that.
Someone who, I am not a sports fan, but I purposefully follow Andrew on Bearcat Game Day because you make the sports more interesting than they are just on their own. Your Twitter feed is amazing to me. I could watch a game and not get as much out of it as I get out of 2 or 3 tweets that you have about a game. So how do you do that?
Yeah, right there.
That is maybe the highest compliment
Shout
I've ever
out
received,
right there.
So yeah. I really appreciate it.
How do you do that though? How do you? I mean, because it's so hard to be narrative in 140 characters.
Right.
Is that natural?
Right.
Did you just kind of just go about it? Just that's your tweeting style?
So I think part of it is that I followed beat reporters that covered the Royals, and they were always a little snarky, especially when the fans are overreacting. And I actually enjoy it sometimes when fans reply to me and they're like, oh no, this and that, and then you just quote tweet them and say oh, cancel Christmas, it's because we could talk about that too. Is that
Twitter strategy?
Sports really don't matter, and sometimes people in your DMs and your notifications want you to think that it matters, but I think, and maybe that's a bad take from somebody trying to make their career in sports, but in the larger scheme they don't matter. But on Twitter, it's just, you have to give people a reason to follow you and the reason to consume your updates over the competition. Because if you're just tweeting, Ryan Hawkins hit a 3, it's 47-43 here at Bearcat Arena. You can get that from the box score. You can get that from anything. But if you make a joke, if you point out something that you aren't going to know from home, and that's mostly what I try to do, is just insert my personality into the tweets, and just trying to be as funny as I can, as often as I can, or maybe being critical in a way that might be humorous, or just pointing out things that are happening that that I think are just interesting and are going to provide some more context to what's going on. And one thing I've done a lot lately is attaching myself to Luke Waters, who at the beginning of the season was like this guy that played 3 minutes a game. And I think I said earlier, I was like, I'm the president of the Luke Waters fan club. Like I'm gonna champion him. And now he's playing like 37 minutes a game. And it looks like I was really smart by targeting Luke Waters early on. But in reality, I just thought it's funny. His name is Luke Waters, so there's so much you can do with that. He's like this 6'7" guy that is kind of like, he's like large in size, but he's kind of like just the way he talks, and his nature is kind of introverted. And he's just like almost like an anti-hero on that team when you have the personalities like Ryan Hawkins and Diego Bernard and Trevor Hudgens, and all your non-sports fans listeners don't know what I'm talking about. But it's interesting, and I think I don't know, people like it.
That's
on
a key though. You already are you're viewing a sports team with a story in mind, right? I see 5 people out there at the court, but you're seeing the story that's happening on the court with the 5 people, right? Like you're seeing that. Like it just comes to you.
I just thought it'd be, I don't know. I had a class with Luke Waters, and I was like, this guy is going to be, because they're all like, every player in that program is good. So I was figuring, if you just call him early before everybody else knows about it, it'll make you look smart. And it's just funny. He's like a cult hero to me. And I don't know why. And the fans seem to be really into it. And yeah, just try to be funny on Twitter.
So they need to mail their fanship membership money
right
directly to the Missourian.
I can drop my Venmo if you guys.
Perfect.
So what do you do as the managing editor?
Right now, a lot more than I was doing last semester. Managing editor generally is kind of, I always say, mostly does nothing, because really it's just kind of assisting the editor-in-chief, Rachel Adamson, with what she needs done. A lot of it's managing staff conflict, which we just try to avoid anyway. But also, like, most managing editors are not also sports reporters. And then at the start of this semester, I wrote that Matt Tritton feature because I've been serving as the A&E editor too, and then the opinion editor as well. So there's been a lot. But I guess mostly what I do is just, we have to look at every story before they go to print. So you go through and edit those for content, grammar, AP style, stuff like that. And then making sure pages are designed, making sure photos are taken. So I guess in an ideal world, the managing editor would just kind of be the filler.
Making sure everything got done.
Right, yeah, the sand to fill in a cup full of golf balls at times. Just whatever needs to be filled in, whatever needs to happen. I think ideally that would be me. But then with, I'm a beat reporter as well for sports and do the other stuff. So at times it can be a lot, and at times it can feel like too much. But I didn't come here to play school, as I always say. I came here to play newspaper. So
what are your plans when you graduate? What do you want to do?
I really just want to write, get paid to write. And I say that a lot. Getting paid dollars to write words is really what I'm trying to do. In an ideal world, the Kansas City Star would be awesome. The Athletic, which is like an up and coming.
We're trying to get the early story on you so that they can be like, we hired Andrew Wegley.
Yeah, you guys were I'm your Luke Waters, maybe. We'll see. Wouldn't that be something? But yeah, it's to work at somewhere like the New York Times, Washington Post. I know that print media, as a lot of people like to point out to print media students, is not going the way it needs to be. Subscriptions are dropping, newspapers are closing. The company that owns the Kansas City Star is in debt and on the verge of bankruptcy, and it's all disheartening. It's all gloom and doom. But I just think there will always be at least some market for good storytelling, and particularly in-depth storytelling. And those are two things that I really...
And sports aren't going to go away.
Yeah. So there will always be a market for some kind of sports media and some kind of good storytelling. And I'm just trying to find out where there will be a place in that market for me once I'm done here.
Do you have any tips or tricks for students on how to get a job on campus, how to get plugged in, any tips or tricks or advice?
Well, to get on campus, you should want to work for the Missourian and apply right now, because we do have some openings, an A&E reporter, opinion columnist, stuff like that. But I guess in general, I think like the most key thing you can do to get a job on campus is like to talk to people, because I think people, when they want jobs, sometimes they're like, okay, I'm just going to send all these applications online. But that just won't work as well for you if you, I mean, even at the, like, we don't even have our applications online for the Missouri. Like, you have to come in and grab an application because we can't keep them up all the time because we have to close the positions and on all that. So, yeah, just going, like, if you want to know where you want to work somewhere, go talk to somebody there. Worst case scenario, they can't hire you.
They say no.
Yeah.
And you have a really cool off-campus job, too, and I wanted to talk about that. Your
substitute
job.
teaching.
Yes, that's a really cool.
It's a blast sometimes. So, yeah, I'm a substitute teacher, which in hindsight should have been a substitute teacher in the Maryville School District, but I was like, I'll do it in Raytown, partly because my mom works as a substitute teacher in the district still, and partly because I graduated there. But it was definitely a hassle because I didn't have classes on Fridays last semester, so I would drive down at in my head I was like, okay, I'll go down Thursday night. But then I was like, I'm packing a bag just to stay one night, just to go sub and then come right back. So I was like, okay, I'll just start getting up at 4 a.m. And going there. But it in some ways the easiest job I've ever had, and some days it definitely was. Especially like high school, like you can just tell those kids like, all right, do your worksheet, don't bother me. I did elementary school once, a couple times actually, and that's a whole different ballgame. Middle school, hit and miss, really. It really is. Like middle school, some days you're like, these kids are cool, and then some days you're like, I am starting to understand why teachers call in. Like I'm starting to understand why nobody likes middle schoolers. So, you don't go over to Horace Med or wherever and ask those kids what they're going to major in. They don't say middle school education. They're all early or late. Nobody wants to be. I don't know how you end up as a middle school teacher, but God bless.
How'd you decide to be a sub? What instigated
You know how much
that?
they pay you to be a sub? That is how I decided to be a sub. It was $100 a day when I started, and they just upped their rate in Raytown to $130 because nobody wants to do it. And also because my mom, she was like, oh, you should sub. And I was like, And all you have to do is hit the 60 credit hours. And I was like, I can't find another job that's only going to let me work on Fridays, is going to pay me $13 an hour essentially, and is going to work around, because even if I don't want to work on a Friday, I could just not schedule a job. So I guess it was just the convenience factor. I was like, this will be perfect. I don't have classes on Fridays. I'll go back. I'll make easy money. It's like $400 a month if you work every Friday. And then even on holidays for us that aren't holidays for them, I could go work, and it was just like, it's worth the money, I think, especially now $130 a day, because I don't know what that comes out to, but it's more an hour than I'd ever made at any other job, ever made at Hy-Vee or make at the Missourian. So yeah, I guess it was just the financial factor, and then also that I always thought it'd be really cool to be a substitute teacher, but I wanted to do it when I was young enough to enjoy it, because I saw like the Key and Peele sketch where they like mispronounce the names, and I was like, oh, that would be so fun if you just went in and started messing with kids. But it turns out they don't like that, so I never really did that.
Key lessons learned.
Yeah, so, I remember seeing on your social media actually that you were doing that, and I was like, that's such a smart part-time college job, because no nights, no weekends, you set your schedule, you
Super
only
flexible.
work when you want to work.
Yeah.
Like I wish I would have thought of that as a college student, because 60 hours, that's, most kids have that by sophomore year with dual credit.
Shout out my mom, Kim. Yeah. She's awesome.
She's a genius.
She put me on.
Way to go, Kim. All right, well, anything else that you want to share? This has been great.
I got one last question for you.
Here we go.
Travis, let me have my question.
Sorry.
I'm so excited.
What does it mean to you to be a Bearcat?
Oh, that's a loaded. There's a lot there. Sheesh. To be a Bearcat, to me, I guess I'd say it's just has a lot to do with involvement, and I think that was a cliche answer. Here's my real answer: is that when I got to Northwest, I did not like it at all. My first semester, hated it. Spent most of my time in my dorm. Second semester was a little better. Probably wanted to transfer. Definitely considered it. I think a lot of people do. And I just didn't like Maryville because it was cold, and the sun shines 4 months a year.
And the wind.
And
so
and they
terrible.
don't tell you about the wind on the brochure. And maybe you guys can do something about that, because I had my visit in August, and I said, oh, this will be great. And I got here in August, and then 2 months later I was like, oh, this is the worst. But I don't know, just something about Northwest, and this probably doesn't even answer your question, but it grows on literally everybody that sticks around here long enough. And I was talking to Matt Tritton about it. I talk about this to a lot of people. And I don't know what it is, because if you'd asked me my freshman year what I'd think about it my junior year, I'd be like, oh, I hate Maryville and don't want to be here. But I don't go home that often now. I mean, it's just something about Maryville, something about the community, something about the campus that it just grows on you over the time. So I guess what it means to be a Bearcat is to be a part of that community that just has a different effect on you once you've been here. And I don't think could be fully understood by someone who hasn't been here.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Andrew. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and be sure to check out the Northwest Missourian website and Andrew on social media. Both are definitely well worth your time, for sure.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, that will do it for another edition of Behind the Bearcat, and we'll talk to you next time. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed that episode. Don't forget to follow on your podcast platform of choice and on YouTube. Also, click the little notification bell on YouTube so you never miss an upload. And you can follow us on social media on Twitter, Instagram, and we have a LinkedIn page.